Have you ever wondered why some people are born with luxury and others face constant struggle? The difference isn't just about resources. It's often about unseen systemic forces. We're diving deep into the real reasons behind global inequality, uncovering patterns of opportunity and constraint. If we really trace this timeline back, we quickly realize that much of the modern world's economic geography isn't a natural occurrence. It's an imprint left by history's deep footprint. For centuries, European powers established systems designed solely for extraction, taking resources and labor, not building local wealth. They weren't investing in education or infrastructure for the benefit of the people who lived there, but rather creating efficient routes to send raw materials back home to fuel industrial revolution economies like Britain's. Think of rubber from Malaya or cotton grown across American plantations. These cash crops fueled immense prosperity in London and Manchester, while the local communities were left with depletion, indentured labor, and broken governance structures. By deliberately undermining indigenous trade networks and replacing them with single commodity focus, they ensured that economies remained dependent on goods destined for foreign markets after independence. It wasn't just the physical theft of wealth. It was the systemic demolition of self-sufficient institutions, from banking to local governance, that created deep structural challenges still faced by many nations today. Even well into the 20th century, administrative frameworks and economic dependencies remained locked in place, creating patterns of poverty that resist simple solutions. It turns out that having oil reserves or fertile soil isn't the main ingredient in a wealthy nation. What really makes the difference is simply reliable plumbing, and I don't mean literal plumbing. We are talking about institutions, the predictable rules of law, consistent governance, and most critically, defined property rights. When people know that if they spend years inventing something or building up a workshop, they will actually keep the profit without arbitrary seizure by a local warlord or government whim, that is when true wealth accumulation begins. Think back to early industrial breakthroughs. An inventor in London in 1850 wasn't just relying on his own skill, he was protected by courts and patents, a social contract providing safety for risk-taking. Conversely, look at regions where ethnic conflict or the rule of law shifts daily. Here, innovation doesn't bother to begin because the reward could be wiped out with a sudden policy reversal or even violence. Stable institutions don't guarantee prosperity, but they are the essential bedrock that allows human ingenuity, the collective brilliant minds of millions, to finally take root and grow without the constant fear of utter collapse. While we often focus on mineral wealth or stable government as drivers of national income, perhaps the most potent and enduring engine of development is actually something far simpler: quality education. This isn't just about reading ability. It's a profound transfer of intellectual capital, the kind that allows people to challenge not only their parents' jobs, but entire inherited structures of poverty. Education equips individuals with systems thinking, giving them the tools to become problem solvers rather than merely recipients of aid. Consider the story of young scholars in places like India or parts of sub-Saharan Africa. When a girl gains access to chemistry or basic engineering principles, she is suddenly capable of understanding markets, medical needs, and better farming techniques on her own. Knowledge becomes her personal currency, giving her leverage where pure physical labor would never grant it. Through schooling, a person doesn't just get job skills, they gain agency, the confidence and critical perspective required to say no to exploitation or to insist on a better wage. It is arguably the single greatest equalizer humanity has ever invented. Modern life is staggeringly complex, built on sprawling global supply chains that connect every corner of the planet. This system means that your smartphone component might have been mined in Congo, assembled in Vietnam, and finally sold to you here. The issue isn't a lack of resources in poorer nations. It's how those resources are packaged into trade. Instead of building diverse manufacturing economies, many developing countries are locked into the role of raw commodity suppliers, digging up minerals or growing cash crops for purchase by factory complexes in the global north. Think about cobalt, essential for modern batteries. Much of this vital material still comes from artisanal mines operated by families, making them incredibly vulnerable to price fluctuations set thousands of miles away. This dependency means that while a nation's earth holds immense potential value, its economic self-determination remains dangerously out of reach, perpetuating a structure where they are always selling the ground floor and never building the penthouse. The single greatest destroyer of wealth isn't necessarily bad resource management. Often, it's simply a lack of peace. When stability crumbles, progress doesn't just stall, it evaporates overnight. Think about what conflict takes. It rips apart not only bridges and power grids, but the fundamental belief that tomorrow will be better than today. The cost is measured in lost harvests, displaced families, and generations whose potential is extinguished before they can live it out. We see this vividly in places swept by civil war. Decades of careful planning and education can vanish with a single shelling or regime collapse. Consider Afghanistan, for instance. The cycles of violence have repeatedly thwarted attempts to build lasting institutions, leaving incredible amounts of human capital, skilled engineers, dedicated teachers, brilliant minds, brutally underdeveloped. The focus shifts from building hospitals and schools to pure survival, trapping communities in desperate cycles of dependency and trauma that are nearly impossible to escape. True wealth requires predictability. It demands a framework where people feel safe enough to risk their dreams on the next day's efforts. But beyond just natural resources or labor, one of the most potent differentiators is something intangible: a cultural dedication to innovation. Becoming a technological pioneer isn't an accident. It requires deliberately cultivating environments where massive investments in basic research are seen as civic necessities, not just corporate luxuries. Think about post-war Japan, for example. After devastating war years, instead of relying on old industrial models, the government actively guided industry toward electronics and petrochemicals, viewing failure not as an embarrassment, but as a necessary step toward advancement. This isn't achieved by mandating technology. It's built through educational reform and fostering a deep acceptance of calculated risk. The modern model perfected by places like Silicon Valley, and indeed, leading global centers today, is one where venture capital treats failure as tuition paid for the next breakthrough idea. It changes the arithmetic of success itself, transforming scientific curiosity into global economic power. Think of it this way: a nation's true wealth isn't just measured by its oil reserves or factories. It's measured by the strength and potential of its people. When you talk about human capital investment, we are talking specifically about ensuring that every citizen grows up healthy, educated, and well-nourished. If a child spends their early years fighting malnutrition, those lost developmental windows can create deep, generational gaps in productivity that money alone cannot fix. Consider the progress seen following global campaigns like those spearheaded by organizations including UNICEF. Massive improvements in maternal health dramatically decreased childhood mortality rates. This isn't just humanitarianism, it's pure economics. By ensuring reliable access to clean water and basic sanitation, a country directly reduces illness-related income loss, allowing working adults to show up to work, healthy and focused. When the World Bank tracked the impact of improved vaccination rates in parts of Southeast Asia over recent decades, they found corresponding spikes not just in attendance at school, but in overall national GDP contribution. Giving people the basic gift of robust health is arguably the single most profitable investment a government can make, transforming potential suffering into tangible national achievement. It would be a mistake to ever treat debt as merely an accounting concept. For nations, debt is a story, a promise whispered by lenders that often comes with crippling strings attached. When countries take out enormous sovereign loans, they are essentially mortgaging their future stability to external powers or international banks. While initial borrowed money can fund crucial public works, like infrastructure needed for growth, the problem emerges when servicing the interest becomes disproportionately large compared to a nation's actual income. Consider the Latin American debt crises of the 1980s. Many nations spent decades paying back loans from institutions that had little say in their own domestic policies. This cycle often forces drastic, painful austerity measures, cutting healthcare funding or laying off teachers, all dictated by external creditors hoping to secure payments they themselves might struggle to provide. It is a vicious loop. The need for cash forces foreign loans, and repaying those loans prevents any room left for local development. For ordinary citizens living through these cycles, the true cost of international debt isn't recorded in bond futures. It's seen when hospitals lack medicine or when the electricity flickers night after night. Understanding global wealth is never about blaming people. It's fundamentally about systems, history, and power structures. The challenges are vast, but recognizing these fundamental forces is the first step toward advocating for real, systemic change. What role do we each play in building a more equitable world?